thank you so much for joining me for today's video. About 4.5 years ago, a show called Critical Role came into my life. For those of you who don't know, Critical Role is a show where a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors sit around and play Dungeons and Dragons. Now, some of you are probably rolling your eyes, but believe it or not, Critical Role has actually taken the world by storm, as have most other tabletop RPGs. In fact, it's going through a renaissance. And I personally give 50% of the credit for that renaissance to Critical Role. I am among those who have a deep personal love for Critical Role, but it has also helped me in a professional capacity because it introduced me to tabletop RPGs. So I'm going to be breaking down why writers should at least try to play tabletop RPGs for their careers. Reason number 1, you have fun while also honing your skills. Let's face it, all writers, especially indie writers, are working their asses off 24/7, and we're probably even more susceptible to burnout than most people in other professions, with a few exceptions. We all need a break, but we feel like we can't take one. There are 2 reasons for this. Reason number 1, writing is either our full-time job, so we need to write all the time in order to make money. Or reason number 2, we have the ultimate goal of becoming a full-time writer, but until that happens, we can only write whenever we find the time, which can be pretty hard to find if you have a day job, or a family, or anything else going on in your life. But we're all still human. Well, I'm not. I'm a vampire hermit. Not the sun! But I still need breaks and vacations and days of fun just like we all do. Playing tabletop RPGs gives you the chance to have a break, and it may even get you to go out and socialize. And even while you're taking this fun break, you're still honing your skills as a writer. As a player, it's your responsibility to create your character and write their backstory. From those backstories, you can determine how your character would react to certain situations. Fight or flight, lover or fighter, hero or villain. And if you have enough time to become a dungeon master or a game master, you have to write the backstories for a lot of characters so that you can determine how they would act and react to your players' characters. By playing tabletop RPGs, you'll think about character behavior in ways that you've never thought of before. And you'll get to have fun while doing it. So you get a break while working at the same time. You take notes during the game, and then you bring those notes to your writing desk. What could be better? Reason number 2, scrapped characters don't have to go to waste. I'm paraphrasing here, but Taliesin Jaffe of Critical Role once said something to the effect of 90% of all D&D characters are characters from books and screenplays that never came to fruition. We have all had stories that we've had to lock away for whatever reason. They're outdated, someone else beat you to the idea, or you just outgrew them. Tabletop RPGs allow you to bring those dead stories and characters back to life so you can see how they would have actually lived out. Will Friedle from Boy Meets World actually admitted that his character from Critical Role, Kashaw Vesh, was based on a character from a screenplay that he wrote. So, your character and story graveyard can be made a little bit smaller if you play tabletop RPGs. And who knows, maybe the game will show you a better way to utilize your character and their story for future books. Reason number 3, there's a tabletop RPG for everyone and every genre. Just because Dungeons and Dragons is the most well-known tabletop RPG doesn't mean that it's the only one out there for you to play. Some people will brush D&D off because 1, the system is a little too complex, or 2, they don't want to play in a fantasy world that's very Lord of the Rings, Tolkien-esque. Fortunately, there are a million different games out there that fall into different genres and use different systems. Are you writing a story that's more sci-fi? Try Will Wheaton's Titan's Grave. or any of the Star Wars RPGs. Perhaps your book or character has a more Lovecraftian flavor to it. Try Call of Cthulhu. Are you writing about non-sparkly vampires in a modern age who aren't afraid to rip someone apart? Then you'll probably love Vampire the Masquerade. Hell, there are even tabletop role-playing games for My Little Pony and the WWE. I'm not even remotely kidding about that. And if you're worried about playing a game with a system that is super complicated, fortunately, there are games out there for you. Grant Howitt is making a fortune on Patreon by creating one-page tabletop RPGs like Honey Heist and Crash Pandas. And because they're only one page, they're not super complex. And if you have a learning disability that makes a lot of excessive math really hard for you to do, there are games out there that have minimal to no math involved. Dread is a psychological horror game that doesn't use any dice or math at all. All you're playing with is a Jenga tower. And you can combine stories and games if you just want to have fun. You can have a Dungeons and Dragons game that tells the story of Nightmare Before Christmas from the perspective of Santa's elves. Or you can have a Harry Potter Breakfast Club mashup. The possibilities are endless. So if D&D isn't your cup of tea, something else in the world is. Reason number 4, writer's block doesn't stand a chance against the wealth of creativity that is tabletop RPGs. One of the benefits I have found from watching Critical Role is that the brilliance of Dungeon Master Matthew Mercer is almost infectious. If ever I'm having a rough writing day, watching an episode of Critical Role cuts right through that writer's block. Especially if it's an episode where Matt is forced to think on his feet a lot. Which is the point where I tell you about Victor.
Yes! Oh, you said you need black powder! Yes, coming!
If you're having a bad writing day, or hell, a bad writing week, see how you feel after your weekly game with your group. Or see if you can schedule an emergency one. Being around different people playing different characters and a dungeon master who practically has to write an entire series for y'all can be pretty helpful. Basically, playing tabletop RPGs is creativity by osmosis. And finally, reason number 5. If you're brave enough to become a dungeon master or game master, you have a captive audience of critique partners and beta readers. As I said in my last point, a dungeon master basically has to write an entire series of books if they're running a long-term original campaign. The campaign guide that Matthew Mercer wrote for his Critical Role fans only covered one continent in this world that he created, and he only covered the history up until after the Chroma Conclave arc. To fit in all the information about all the other continents and the history after the Chroma Conclave, Matt's gonna have to write at least 3 more campaign guides. And he's gonna have to work out everything, down to the names of the days of the weeks, the names of the months in a year, and all the names of the holidays and when they happen. In short, he has to do what we do when we write books. So, say you're writing a book, and you've just finished the second draft. You're pretty happy with it, but you feel like you need more feedback from more critique partners and beta readers, who can sometimes be hard to find. You need more feedback on what's good, what's bad, what's missing, what did people like, what did people not like, and where are they looking for the story to go. Why not try giving your resident dungeon master or game master a night off, create a campaign in the system of your choosing that's similar to the book that you've written, and run it for your group. The NPCs can be characters that your main character has to talk to throughout the story. The chain of events can happen in the exact same way that it does in your story. Items found in the book can be found in the game. Worst case scenario, you'll have to limit your number of players, limit what classes and races they can play, and limit what levels they can start and end at, because, hey, let's see how it fits in your story. If you're unsure about just a singular part of your story, you can make a one-shot game that will be done in a day. If you need feedback on the whole book, you can take as long as you need. You already have the story right in front of you, so all you would really need to do is study up on how your system works and how physics is treated in your specific genre. If your story is heavy in fights and battles, you can find players who excel at dungeon crawls. If your story is more character-driven and focuses more on growth, then you can find people who excel more at the role-playing end of tabletop RPGs. A good DM or GM will check in with their players after every game to see how they feel. So you can take that time to ask your players what they thought of the story and what they would recommend changing. If the game was too easy, they'll tell you. Then you'll know that your book is maybe too simple and needs to be more complex. If the game was too hard, they'll tell you, and you'll know that you need to maybe ease up. Though, if your game ends with a total party kill, you'll probably already know that. Unless, of course, that's how you want your book to end, and then there you go. If there are any loopholes in your story, your players will find them and tell you about them. And if they loved the game, you can tell them it's based off of a book that you're writing. They just might buy the book when it gets published. That's all I have for you today. If you liked this video, don't forget to bitch slap that like button, and while you're at it, why don't you bitch slap that subscribe button and flick that bell so that you can be notified every time I upload a new video. My book, Starforged Orion, and my play How Are You are still available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Starforged is also available on Barnes & Noble's website. If you want to find other ways to support me, go ahead and check out my Patreon. I'm just saying you can become a beta reader if you wanted to. And don't forget to check out my other social media sites if you want more content. Toodles!